All right, so I will be posting this after class along with a link to the shorter video that I'm going to show during class and anything that we have from our question and answer sessions from all 3 class periods. I'm going to have that as well. And I think I'm going to try and see if I can save a PDF copy of the slides that we use for class so that you can go back and just look at them for review. I know that there's maybe 1 or 2 people that actually have a printer at home. So if you wanted to print it out, you could. But I am well aware that most people don't own a printer. And if you do, it's most likely out of ink or about to be out of ink. And printer ink is, I'm pretty sure, who was it? Somebody told me that they priced out a gallon of printer ink one time. And it was basically like $1,500 for a gallon of ink. And that was just for like cheap black ink. But I was just like, that's just ridiculous, especially considering that it probably costs like 10 cents to make that gallon of ink. To charge, like they charge you so much money for those little cartridges. It's ridiculous. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. You'll see here that I asked you to go ahead and open up your school email and locate the results from our attendance poll from yesterday. So we did our 4 P's of planning yesterday in the attendance poll. So when we're doing what we're going to be doing next, you might need that, okay? And I also said on here to take 5 minutes to find yourself a notebook that you could use, or if you have a planner, get that out and grab a pen or pencil, because we're going to be talking about backwards planning a little bit today, and the next big assignment that's coming. So this week I asked you to go ahead and do 4 ed puzzles. Each ed puzzle is under 10 minutes long, or maximum is 10 minutes. I think they're from between 8 and 10 minutes. So we looked at 4 different poems. The first one that I had listed, I don't know if I put them in the same order for everybody, but this one is the screenshot there chunked. And I mean chunked in that the first 2 on this list have something in common, and the second 2 on the list have something in common with each other. So the first 2 here is Harlem by Langston Hughes and The Rose That Grew in Concrete by Tupac Shakur. The thing that those 2 have in common is that they are dealing with the central idea of dreams and making your dreams come true. So Harlem by Langston Hughes is talking about what happens when you can't make those dreams come true and you have to put them off for some reason, whether that's because of society's pressures or the fact that society in some way is holding you back from completing those. In Langston's case, he being an African-American man in the turn of the century of the 1900s, I should say, he was facing systemic racism as well as overt racism that was holding him back from being able to pursue certain dreams. Some of those barriers that he had have now been, I don't want to say removed, but we can say removed or minimized or, or at least decreased, but not all of them have. There are still some that are there in, the way our laws are written, in the way people are treated, and socially, and those things are in some way accepted still. And when we talk about systemic racism, that still exists today. And a lot of the things that are there for that are embedded in laws that on the surface don't seem racist, but when you dig down underneath and actually take a look at the effects of those laws and who they affect, you begin to realize that they are in fact racist. One of the arguments there, actually, if you want to see one that's really obvious, is the idea that you have to have a voter identification card for voting. Think about it this way. If we know that the minorities in our country, And by minorities, I mean people who are most likely people of color or indigenous people. Those are people whose political power and power in society are not where what we would typically consider the dominant force, which would be white people, are at. Okay. They don't have the political sway, they don't have the social sway that white culture has. Okay. So if we look at them as a whole, statistically speaking, people of color typically don't are more likely to be from um, like households that are below or at the national poverty limit. So they may not have the funds to own a car or to pay for things beyond their simple means of actual survival, right? So a driver's license in the state of Ohio currently costs you, I think, $21. And I heard on the news last week, I think it was, that they are going to be upping the price of registration and driver's license and things like that in order to pay for things. So if we change that, even by upping it $4 for driver's license, $25 can be the difference between paying your electric bill, paying for food for the week, even paying for transportation to the license bureau. All right. That's a lot of money for some people. It may not be much for a middle class person who is making between like $75,000 and $150,000 a year. It may not be anything to them. Like to them, $25 is, they're like, no big deal. I drop that at McDonald's every day. Right. But for other people, that is a lot of money. And they would then have to make a decision. Do I want to, spend this money just so I can go vote once every 4 years or once a year? Or should I save that money so that I can do things like pay my bills or feed my children? And in that case, that is what I mean by systemic racism. When you realize that something as simple as upping how much it costs to get a driver's license and then requiring a driver's license in order to vote could be what keeps somebody from being able to vote, that's what systemic racism is. Because the people who are most likely affected by that law are people of color or indigenous people, not the people who already have the power in society. Okay? And that's what we mean when we talk about those kind of things. So, and that's what Langston Hughes and even Tupac were really talking about in a lot of their poetry, is how they are directly affected by some of these policies that, for the most part, on the surface, don't seem to be purposely meant to hold you back. But when you realize who is being held back and how widely spread that tactic is, you begin to realize how much privilege you don't have when you aren't one of these people who comes from a family with two incomes who, between those two incomes make $150,000 or more $1,000 a year. I hate to tell you this, my teacher's salary and my husband's salary, between the two of us, we don't make that much money per year, that 150. And I'm using that $150,000 a year because if you have been paying attention to what's going on in the news lately, that is the threshold that they're using for who gets a stimulus check and who doesn't in this next round of stimulus checks. They're saying anybody who makes $150,000 a year or more does not need a stimulus check. So then they're saying anybody who makes underneath that, and that is a big difference, because there are people in this country who make as little as $8,000 a year at their job versus $149,000 a year. The person who's making $8,000 a year would give anything just to make half of what the person in the top part of that makes. But yet they're all going to get the same check. Does that sound quite right to you now? All right. So those are the kind of things he's dealing with. Whereas Shakespeare and Neruda were dealing more with the idea of love and what true love really looks like. All right. So this is the assignment that you're going to be given, and I'm going to be posting this after class today. And then I think I'm just going to go ahead and add in the graphic organizer over the weekend when I have the chance to finish it, because I don't want to put it in incomplete. All right. So I'll put that in with all of the other stuff on probably Sunday or Monday at the latest. So the instructions are simple. I want you to pick 2 of the poems that we will have looked at this week. So you'll pick either Tupac or Langston Hughes's poems, or you can pick Neruda and Shakespeare. And then you're going to write an analysis of how each one of those people, okay, the 2 that you pick, worked independently to do something similar, okay? So how did they look at this motif of love or the topic of love? Or did they present the same theme, perhaps, using different methods? What is it that they did, okay? I gave you guys a little checklist here. I kind of pared it down because I've noticed that nobody's using the checklist I give. And then I decided maybe it's because they're too long and overwhelming. So I chunked it into 3 pieces here with no more than 4 things for you to click off on, and really focused on the things that people seem to struggle with the most when they're turning stuff in, to make sure that you guys have polished everything up before you're turning it in. So that includes like having a heading, what should be in your heading and what order, checking your format. Each paragraph needs to be indented using the tab button on your computer. There shouldn't be any spaces in between your paragraphs because the tab indent shows us where one paragraph begins and the next one ends. All right. And then after you've done that, you highlight just the body of your paragraph of your essay, and you double space. Okay. That way everything is the way it's supposed to be. Then you're going to double check your writing. You're going to use Pro Writing Aid, that add-on that we talked about. And I know we have a new student who's with us today, as well as one that joined us, last week, some new students. So I'm going to need to explain to them what that Pro Writing Aid is and how to get that. So I'll do that. I'll put the video up on how I explain that with the assignment as well. So you can correct your grammar. You don't need to be saving grammar reports for this, though. I just want you to make sure you're polishing it and using that tool. And then take the time to read your paper out loud to somebody else to check for clarity. I think Kayla will testify to this, because I think it's one of the things that we did in class where I said, when you're done with your paper, you need to turn to a neighbor and read the first paragraph out loud to that person, just to kind of check out what you may have missed. Okay. I actually, in doing that, have found a number of errors even in these instructions and had to rewrite them several times over. So this is my latest iteration of them. And then the rubric that we're going to be using covers MLA format, having a hook with some sort of clickbait quality to it, a thesis statement that includes proper structure and placement. When I say structure and placement, that means your thesis statement, since we're talking about literature, is going to name the specific poems that you're talking about and their authors, and then you're going to state very simply what you're going to talk about. So off the top of my head, and remember, do not be intimidated that I can come up with a thesis statement off of the top of my head, as this is not my first go around at writing thesis statements. I've been writing them for about 30 years, for one. For two, it's also the 5th time that I've said I'm going to do it off the top of my head, because this is my 5th time teaching this particular lesson in the past 2 days. So I've had some practice at this. So I know it sounds intimidating, but that's not what I mean to do. So my thesis statement, like let's say I'm writing about Tupac and Langston Hughes. I might have the thesis statement says, in the poem, Harlem by Langston Hughes and The Rose That Grew in Concrete by Tupac Shakur. Both writers explore the idea of having your dreams come true, period. Okay. Then in the body of my essay, I'm going to have to explain that Langston Hughes is talking about what it's like to not have your dreams come true, what happens to those dreams, whereas Tupac is talking about what it's like to work super hard when everybody else tells you that those dreams are worthless and will never come true, just to get them to come true and not having any support to do that, what that feels like and everything. Okay. So that would be the things that I would show are different. And then I would have to have evidence from my paper to show that. So the evidence, let me go back to my slides here. I'm going to need to quote it. So I'm going to have it quoted citation-wise with MLA format. And then I need to also make sure that I'm explaining how it supports my thesis statement. So you'll see here on our thesis, underneath thesis, I should say, is supporting evidence. And it says using textual evidence to support the thesis with a clear explanation of the connections between evidence and the topic it is used to support. And then citation of evidence is separate. So using this evidence is going to be very important because it's 8 out of 24 points, which is like almost a full third of the entire essay's points. Okay. So if you're not using evidence and you're not citing it properly, you're not going to be able to get above a C on this at all. And that's with everything else done perfectly. And the final thing is how many errors you have with grammar. And in here, I put that down as standard American English grammar because that's what most grammar checkers use. And just so you guys know, Tupac does not use standard American English grammar. So make sure that anything that you use of his is in quotation marks, because when I'm checking your grammar, anything that's in quotation marks does not get checked. Okay. So when he uses things like the word you versus the letter U, meaning the same thing, which would be considered slang or text lingo, or the number 2 instead of the word 2, those things a typical grammar checker would tell you to fix. So if the grammar checker you're using tells you to fix it, you need to be smarter than it is and know that that's in a quote and that you don't fix what's in a quote, because sometimes those differences are there for a reason. Okay. All right. So any questions about the assignment before we talk about how to start planning for the assignment? Because that's our next goal. All right, so to quickly just answer some of the questions that other students have asked in other classes, it will be due on Sunday, February 14th. It needs to be 4 paragraphs long. If you make it 5 or 6 paragraphs, that's fine, but it needs to be at minimum 4 paragraphs. And you have to pick either 2 poems that you're going to discuss. So you're either going to pick the 2 sonnets or you're going to pick the 2 small free verse poems. All right. I'm trying to scroll through and see if there were any other questions that other people had asked that you might be interested in, but I don't think so. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go to the next slide, where Miss Narduzzi, who is my co-teacher in my other classes, has shared with us a video in which she is going to explain a very efficient way to basically take a notebook and make it into a planner. Okay, so we're going to watch that video and then we're going to discuss what she did and how you can put that into your own notebook to use for yourself. Okay. And then we're going to look at how to chunk out our writing assignment that you're going to be given. so that you're not panicking on Valentine's Day, because that's the day that it's due, and spending your entire day trying to write the paper in one sitting. Okay.
Good morning. So yesterday I promised that I would show you my easy peasy notebook way of having a planner. So here's just a plain old composition notebook. I was using this notebook for something else, but you would take like the first 2 pages and create a little yearly calendar. I just started with February because that's where we're at, but you should really do, you could start at February, but you should do through December because you should use it for the whole year. As you can see here, I did Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at the top. And then I started my month because the first was on a Monday. That's where the one goes, under the Monday. And then I kept going to there. February only has 28 days, so that stops there. But you'll see some of my months, like March, goes to the 31st. But the first, see, the first here is on a Monday. The first here is on a Thursday because that's what day the first really is. So your calendar should mimic the real calendar. So what I did was look at the calendar on my iPhone and I made my digital one look just like that. So you'll have 2 pages of this, again, February through December, because I'm not doing that because I have an actual calendar that I use. And as you look up here in February, I have the 14th circled. And I've circled the 14th because I know that's an important day. Yes, it's Valentine's Day, but it's also the day that your poetry essay is due. So any important dates, no matter what they are, you should just circle them. And then over here on the next page, so this would be after you are done with both of the 2 days for the calendar, don't write on this side because as you see, there's ghosting like under the paper and it eventually makes it really hard to see what you have written on both sides. It makes it a little bit, it's yucky. So don't do that. Always write just on the front pages for calendar purposes. If you'd like to take notes like that, that's cool, but we're not going to do that. So for this part, I put February 2021 at the top, and then I put the dates along the side. So the first, second, third, fourth. Make sure you skip a line in between because you may have many things to do. And then I accidentally didn't skip, I skipped 2 pages. And then you're gonna go do that all the way to the 28th, skipping lines, okay? So there's, again, 28 days in February. So I put in, again, I circled, because again, the 14th, poetry essay due. So I circled that date here because it now matches my circle date over there. So you guys could see I circled it on this tiny calendar and on the date over here. So I remember, important day. My poetry essay is due. So let's pretend I'm a student and this weekend I'm going to see my friends on Saturday from 2 to 3. I have family dinner from 6 to 8, but I also have MDM homework and I'm going to do that from 8 to 9 because on Saturday I'm going to sleep. On Sunday, I also work from 1 to 7. I'm going to come home and just eat something real quick, 7:30 to 8 o'clock. And then I'm going to watch 2 Edpuzzles and take notes from 8 to 9. So the point of this is to show you how to block out your time. The more that you block out the time, the more extra time you have. So it might sound counterintuitive that when you make lists of what you need to do, including the time blocking, it's important to always block the time, which is why a planner that goes by the hours is better. But this will work because you still see, okay, I'm from 1 till 9 o'clock at night. I don't have any free time because I'm working. I need to eat dinner and I need to watch my Edpuzzles. But I have time before 1. So if I want to do my nails or if I want to get my hair cut or if I, want to work out, that I would need to do it before this time. Okay. So that's why it's important to have two lines and I have huge handwriting, so that's one of it. But I can write down anything else I need to know. I know that I'm writing a paper that's due here about these 2 Edpuzzles, then I know I'm also going to want to take notes on them. Okay, oops, I got a little blurry there. So again, that's why I have that there. A nice thing too about leaving this side blank is if you need to jot down little notes about things that you don't want to forget for these days here, or for these days here. You have extra space to write notes like little stars on the, just make sure I spell check my paper for the 14th, whatever you need to do. So that is how you could take a regular old notebook and make it into a planner. Good morning. So yesterday.
All right, guys. So any questions that you have about how she set up the planner pages? And then I can share with you some of the questions that other people asked. Anybody? Bueller? All right, so I don't see anybody raising their hand saying that they're going to be asking a question. So I'm going to tell you, I was asked in previous classes how she knew on the numbered page. So let me see if I can cue up the video. It won't let me cue it up. But on the pages that she had where she numbered out the days, how she knew if that was a Monday or a Tuesday.
Good morning. So
here, we'll do it. Mute that. So we'll scan ahead. So you can see on the months, she put the days with just an S, M, T, R, and then an R for Thursday, an F, and an S. That way she knew just by jotting it down what days were in that column. So what we had suggested in looking at the pages that she had numbered in order to put time slots in, I'm trying to get to one where the screenshot is clear for you. Keeps showing me the other page. So here's what I would say. Over here on that side where she's got like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you should probably put down on the top of the page the month. So you would put February up there. And then I would suggest, since the first is a Monday, put the little M next to the 1 there, like a little further over into the margin here. So you know that this is a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay. And then do that in there. If you have a job and you're trying to like put stuff in for your work stuff, also in your school stuff, but you know that you don't get your schedule until like Thursdays, make sure you leave a space if you're planning ahead for the next week for where you would put in the stuff for your work. Or use something that's erasable, like writing things in with pencil, writing things in with like an erasable pen, that kind of thing, so that you would be able to go and put it in there. Yeah, Ariana, I'm going to put the video in. I'm going to post everything under the planner thing, but I'm also going to post it under our assignment. That way you guys have multiple places that you can get to it. All right. So, alrighty. Okay. So I'm going to actually put your question in there in our little question and answer thing, because I'm going to save the Q&A. Makes me a little spreadsheet of the questions that you guys ask. So I can put that up and with our answers to them, so that everybody can see those questions and what the answers were. Okay. And then that way, like if you're like, I know she said something about this, you can go to that and try and find it real quick before having to watch the whole class video again to see what I said. All right. Okay. So those were the kind of questions that we were asked previously about the planner stuff. And we have a little less than 15 minutes. We have about 12 minutes of class time left. So what I wanted to do, I'm not doing this right. There we go. Is talk to you guys about using that planner and starting to do the backwards planning idea. And the first step in that is going to be, I think I'm going to move him to the last thing, is to chunk out your time. So you'll see I actually did this with my other classes. So what you need to do first, especially when you got something big like a writing assignment, is to think about the different steps that you have to complete in order to get to your end goal of having a finished writing piece. Okay. Sometimes there aren't going to be as many steps as there might be in this one. But with this one, what I did is I sat down and I thought about, okay, if I were a student and this was my assignment, what would I need to do in what order in order to get to the point where I'm actually ready to sit down and start writing? All right. So the first thing I said was, oh, well, in order to be able to pick from these 4 poems, the 2 that I want to write about, the first thing I'm going to need to do is watch all 4 of the Edpuzzles so that I'm at least familiar with my 4 poems, right? And I know what I'm picking first. Then I'm going to need to pick 2 of the poems to write about. Then I'm going to probably need to rewatch the Edpuzzles on those poems. And I'm going to need to take some notes on them. Then I'm going to need to do the graphic organizer that my teacher gives me in order to, figure out what I'm going to be writing about each one. Now, FYI, I'm going to give you the graphic organizer, and that's something that we're going to work on together in class on Tuesday of next week for the afternoon classes, and probably on Wednesday for my morning classes. Okay. And then on Thursday of next week, when I see you guys again after our Tuesday class, I should say, on that Thursday, what we're going to work on together is going to be like how to properly cite the evidence that you're using and how to make sure that you're explaining how that evidence supports your thesis statement. Okay. We may also do a quick review of how to download the add-on and how to use it. Depends. It depends on how many people need that. Okay. And that I'm only going to see you guys Tuesday and Thursday next week. So my morning classes, we're actually going to redo this lesson with them so that they get the grasp of what to do with the planner. Okay. Because yesterday was when I ran into this thing here. The 4 steps of making a plan, which are that you make the plan, you execute the plan, and then you watch the plan go horribly awry, so you throw away the plan. All right. So my original plan for this lesson was that we were going to talk about the different types of planners, how to use them. Then we were going to chunk things out for our assignment and then practice putting them in one type of planner. But then I found out that almost nobody owns a planner, and almost none of you are really capable of running out at the drop of a hat and going to buy a planner. So I was like, okay, we're going to throw that plan away. How can we adapt and change so that I'm still helping you guys with the things that you said you needed help with, which are organization and time management. Those are the 2 big things. And a planner is still the answer to that. So how can I adapt this so that if you don't have a planner and you can't go buy a planner for whatever reason, either access to a planner, you don't have money, or the fact that like not everybody carries planners anymore in February. I don't know why. That kind of thing. What can we do? Well, almost all of you have notebooks or at least some paper laying around. We're going to find a way to use that. So in order to do that, we had to rearrange some things so that we can make that video for you guys. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about chunking this out. So I told you these are the steps that we're probably going to need to do in order to write our paper. We've got to complete the Edpuzzles that were assigned this week, choose 2 of them to write about, rewatch them, take some notes, complete the graphic organizer, find some kind of hook for our paper that's going to make somebody want to read it. It's going to stand out, be a little bit different than everybody else's. Write a thesis statement, draft our paper, check the grammar on the paper, read it out loud to somebody, make sure it makes sense, and then submit the paper. And then we have to figure out all of these things. About how much time is it going to take us to do them? So what I want you to do now is we're going to go through these one by one for about the next 10 minutes, a little bit less. We're going to do the first few together. I'll put it that way. And then I'm going to tell you what the other classes did for theirs. And we're going to look at how much time it takes to do them. You can then use that to start thinking about how you want to chunk this out for yourselves. All right. Knowing all the other things that you have on your plate, whether it's jobs, maybe you have a birthday coming up. So you know that you're going to have like a birthday dinner, a family obligation, whatever. Okay. So how long do you think it's going to take you guys to watch the Edpuzzles if you haven't done so already? If you were to sit down and do them all in one day, how much time would you need to set aside? I'm going to give you a hint. There's 4 of them, and each one is 10 minutes or less. They're around 10 minutes apiece, 8 to 10 minutes. So about how long do you think it would take you to do that? Hint, hint, use some math. 4 times 10 is... Make sure I'm not muted. Jeez. I know it's not math class, but 4 times 10 is what?
40 minutes.
40 minutes. Yeah. So at least 40 minutes. I would say 40 to 60 minutes. In case you're one of those people that rewatches it a couple times before you pick an answer. All right. So 40 to 60 minutes to sit and do all of the Edpuzzles and their quiz. Okay. So right there you have about an hour's worth of work. How long do you think it's going to take for you to then pick the 2 that you want to write about? Realistically. I'm going to be honest. It's probably going to take you minimum around 2 to 5 minutes. We'll change that to a 2. Because there's going to be somebody out there who's like, you know what? I really love Tupac. I want to write about Tupac. Or somebody else who's like, I've heard of Pablo Neruda and I really like what he said, so I want to write about Pablo Neruda. And I know I'm probably not saying his name right because he's from Chile. And I'm not good with a Spanish accent. And I know this. And also, just as an FYI, if you're going to talk about how his poem does not rhyme, it doesn't have a rhyme scheme, back up and remember that his original piece was written in Spanish, and it did have rhyme scheme in Spanish. Moving it to a whole different language, it's very difficult to keep that rhyme scheme. Okay? So, but I still love his poem nonetheless. So minimum 2 minutes. I would say maximum probably about 20 minutes because you need to make sure you're familiar. Either pick something that you understand, pick the poems you understand the most, or pick the poems that you enjoyed the most. Okay? That's the way I would go with it. So since we have about 4 minutes left of class, I'm going to show you what some of the other classes came up with. Most recently, last period. So they were a little bit above where the other classes were. One class said it was going to take about 3.5 to 7 hours to do. Last period, it was about 4 to 8. And then the class I did it with the first time said 3 to 6. So I'm going to say that on average, we're looking at between 3 hours and 8 hours, depending on how fast you are at writing or doing all the different steps. So if you are a very practiced and together person who writing is your strength, it could take you as few as 3 hours to do this. And yay, awesome for you. But for the rest of us, it could take all the way up to 8 hours to complete this assignment. All right. So you need to think about realistically, how long does it take you to complete these different steps? All right. And then when you're chunking this out, you can then like maybe put some of the smaller steps together. But remember, they have to go in order. So if I know that I will be done with my Edpuzzles by Sunday night at midnight, because that's when they're due, I don't have to worry about that hour's worth of the work, right? So I don't have to worry about that. I only have to worry about steps 2 through 9. All right, so maybe choosing the poems I want to write about, I know is only going to take me less than 5 minutes. So I can do that on Monday, and then I can also on Monday take the time to rewatch the videos on those 2 poems and take some detailed notes on them, so that maybe I'll also like go and do a little bit of research on each of them. So if I'm doing the one from Pablo Neruda, Sonnet 17, maybe I'll even take the time to see if I can find a recording of it, of him reading it in Spanish, so I can hear how it was originally meant to be heard. All right. I might not understand it because if I'm one out of the 14 people who are currently in this room, I may not be fluent in Spanish. So I might not understand what he's saying, but it's still worth hearing how it was originally meant to be said. Okay. Then I'm going to need to complete my graphic organizer. But I know that Miss Kale said that we're going to start that together in class on Tuesday. So maybe I'm going to put there on Tuesday that we're going to start that in class, and I'll finish it as homework. All right. So Monday, I'm going to choose the poem I want to write about and rewatch and take notes. On Tuesday, I'm going to complete a graphic organizer on it, maybe do a little bit more research on those poems, see what other people have to say about what they had, like what some of the symbolism might be in it, what the tone is, those kind of things. All right. And then maybe I know that that's going to take me like Tuesday and Wednesday. Then on Thursday, I know I need to find a quote for my hook and write my thesis statement. And Miss Kales actually said that's what we're going to be working on Thursday, is those kind of things. So maybe I'll save those for that. And then I know that on Saturday or Friday and Saturday, I have some time. So that's the day that I'm going to set aside to write my draft. Okay. So that I know I should have my draft done by Saturday evening. And then on Sunday, all I'll need to do is double check my grammar and submit the paper. All right. So any questions on how to chunk that out? Because it's 2:00 and the class is over. So you guys are technically free to go. But if you do have any questions, I am willing to stick around and answer them.